Also, like, about one of the problems I've had in my life is that my passions have sometimes seemed to change. Like, I know I'm interested in a lot of things, but that's made it hard for me to determine what I want to actually throw my weight behind. And I know, like, say when I was in high school, or when I was actually let to be a bit freer without, I went to a Steiner school, and so nobody cared if I failed or whatever. Yeah. I kind of, and it was also the influence of like a teacher who, as well, a science teacher. I found a real passion for science, especially chemistry and stuff. It was like Chernobyl and stuff and nuclear physics. They fascinated me. Yeah. But then years later, I find now I'm interested more in say history and humanities and stuff like that. So and politics, more political science stuff like that. But I was wondering,
Can I explain what happens to most people with their passions?
Oh, wow. Oh yeah, please. It's a quagmire.
yeah, it is. It is for many people.
Because I don't feel my old passion anymore, really.
Yeah, and it's sad, hey, in a way, because often the passions associated with our childhood are more true passions than the passions we have when we're adults. And the reason why is this. What happens is we have an emotion inside of us. These are positive emotions, which we'll call them desires or passions, right? Now, when we're a child, we express these desires in a very forthright and expressive manner. So in other words, we're just like exuberant about the passion that we have generally. Now, what happens though generally is that triggers an addiction inside of our parents. The addiction inside of many parents is that they do not want their children to be better than they are at anything. They have emotions of fears, in other words, associated with their children being better or being perceived better, and fears of their own inadequacy, in other words. Let me continue. I'll explain everything as I go. So, you have a desire. The desire inside of you, let's look at the one at you're 14 or 15 years of age, science. Big passion. Big passion for you, chemistry in particular, right? Big passion for you. You say that to your father, or he notices that particular passion inside of you.
In the situation, I actually wanted his support.
If you use your microphone.
In that situation, I remember I wanted his support.
Exactly, because of course it's natural for any child to want the support for their particular desires. It's fairly natural, because the child's just developing. It wants to know whether all of these people here will approve. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Particularly a child, because if the child knows that if all of these people here don't approve, its life's going to be hell, right? So it wants all of these people to approve. Now the problem is it triggers the addictions in all of the people surrounding the child, right? And their addictions now come into play, and when disapproval comes, which is the anger inside of the parent, this creates a sort of a feedback suppression on the desire. Does that make sense to everyone?
Could you repeat that again? Sorry.
There's no worries. What happens is when the emotion of addiction is triggered in the parent or the environment, for people in the environment, and they're challenged emotionally, instead of them going into their fears, they want their addictions met. And when their addictions don't get met, they go into anger, and they project the anger at the child. So dad now gets angry with you. Oh, what a stupid idea. That's, why would you go for chemistry and all those kind of things? This is because of something that's inadequate inside of your dad. Like he feels a certain fear inside of him, and he then projects that at you. Now, because of that, he then is projecting at you anger about you having that desire. So in other words, he's saying to you emotionally, you're not allowed to have this desire. This desire is wrong. I am going to disapprove of you having this desire. I am going to punish you if you have this desire. I'm going to make your life a living hell, generally, is the emotion coming from the parent, while you have this desire. So what do you then want to do? You then want to go, oh, maybe I didn't have that desire. Maybe that desire is just, and you try to suppress it, right? Because it's a natural desire inside of yourself also to have love.
I try to actually have both somehow, his approval, yet Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason why we almost suppress most of our childhood desires is because we're looking for the approval from our parent more than we're willing to embrace our desire without their approval. And so what we need to learn as we become an adult is we need to give up the whole idea that anybody else in the universe needs to approve of our desire.
Or agree.
Or agree with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even agree with our belief systems or
Exactly.
ideas or
We need to let go of all of that. The only time that I wouldn't let go of that is if it could be proven to me that my desire is not loving. So in other words, if somebody could come up to me and say, look, I can prove to you that your desire to murder Joe Blow down the street is not loving because...
to make a nuclear bomb or something.
Yeah. Then I would understand that particular reasoning.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
But aside from that, I would never give up the original desire I had. However, what happens for the majority of us, we are so ingrained into getting the approval and love of other people that we're willing to suppress and even completely give up our desires and only enable the desires that the other people agree with. So in other words, if everyone in this room thought that chemistry was stupid, but psychology is very interesting, and then you started expressing your desire for chemistry, you would all instantly get the disapproval of 20 other people. And then there'd be, if you were hooked into that, if you had an emotion that you wanted their approval, you would then be going, what is it that they want to do? What do they think I should do? And you'd even ask that question perhaps, what do you think I should do there? We think you'd be better at psychology or whatever. And you go, no worries. And there's a place you're allowed to have a desire because everybody else agrees. And it's the suppression, usually by the parent, that using anger as the primary emotion, but not only just anger, they also use withdrawal, stepping away from the child in disapproval. They often don't have a voiced disapproval, but every time you talk about the subject, they're just like their body language and all of their feelings coming from them is, don't talk about this subject, this subject challenges me. And so the child then starts suppressing its true desire and passion. And so what happens over life is that if you think of that as like a big filter, if you could think of it like a big filter, like a flower filter or something like that, the only desires that will come out at the end are the desires that you have that everyone else agrees with.
Yeah. When I was a child, for example, I was passionate about chess, and now, I suppose, years later, I got in touch with my passion for chess, and it's still a great passion.
Yep.
So I got back in touch with that. When I was a child, I can't remember being passionate actually about much. I liked reading, but I never it was always, you don't tell your friends about that, or you don't. I liked reading history or science, lots of things, I suppose, but it was...
A lot of times we like reading because we avoid the emotions of our parents. We don't want to interact with them because if we interact with them, they're often quite damaging emotionally, and so we often withdraw.
Yeah. And
we're taught to withdraw. It's another method of suppressing our desires.
Okay, but these days I don't feel... I keep on bumping into people who are doing this lab technician course that I was considering doing.
Yeah.
Funny enough,
it's interesting how you keep on bumping into them.
On the bus or something, three times.
Can you hold the mic a bit closer?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I don't think that passion that I had as a 14-year-old, that kind of suddenly came up, is there anymore? I'm studying at uni with a bit of history subjects and stuff, seeing how that feels.
See, I would argue that the fact that you're meeting these people on the bus...
I do actually feel a lot of passion for history though these days.
Yeah.
I did probably as a kid as well. I liked, lots of things were interesting.
But the truth is that your family is more accepting of you being...
No, not these. I haven't seen my dad in 10 years.
Yes, but it doesn't matter how long you see him. It's these emotions that matter about a specific thing. the fact is your father is far more able to cope with you in the humanities than he is in the sciences.
Well, no, back then it would have been actually neither, because he was, I mean, I think he was mentally ill or something, but...
no, I'm saying to you, your law of attraction is telling you this. So you see, it's like, you can intellectually analyse a situation, but the reality is your life is proof that of your father's disapproval. Your life is proof of it.
Well, why do I say I have, passion now? Like when I go to a history lecture, I really love it. Or I find my interest is I find myself wondering more about, how political systems and society work and why they work that way. Why is it this way rather than that way?
And the question, you've asked...
So the actual things I ponder about or think about are all to do with society and history, rather than when I was a teenager, it was a completely different headspace. It was like, what's this air made of? Oh, what's that? Why is that rubber feel like that? Oh, what's it about the material? Oh, why that?
Yeah.
Whereas,
you've asked a question.
Headspace.
Yeah, but you've asked the question and you don't want to hear the answer.
Okay, so
the answer I'm telling you is that the reason why you have different passions now than you had when you were 15 is because your father didn't agree with your passions when you were 15, and that's why you have different passions now than when you were 15. If you dealt with the emotion associated with his approval, then you would find actually that there are passions you have that are even greater than your interest in history, that are more related to the sciences. And the only reason why you're not currently involved in them is because you had them suppressed when you were 15. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what's actually happening is the desires that you're left with now that you're allowed to have were the desires that weren't suppressed when you were young. The desires that were suppressed when you were young, you're not allowed to have, and you've learnt you're not allowed to have them. And so you don't let yourself have them. And that's what happens to almost everybody. Almost everybody has a group of desires that they had when they were young, and then we're not allowed to have them because our mum and dad said no, or society says no, or whatever. And so we have all of these desires that we're not allowed to have, and so we have to rub all those desires out of our... You could think of your soul as your desire box, if you like, and you have to rub out these desires that you weren't allowed to have out of your soul, and so the ones that you're going to be left with... And I'm not saying you won't be desirous of them, because you will be, but the ones that you will be left with are the ones that everybody else agrees that you're allowed to have. The ones that weren't attacked when you were young. And that's the reason why certain desires get suppressed through your life. The key is to deal with the underlying emotional reason as to why a certain desire was suppressed. And the reason is always, usually, the emotion in the parent of anger or disapproval towards that desire. So once you deal with that emotion that came from your parent towards you about having certain desires, you will actually then discover your real desires. And you might find history is a part of them, but history is not the only one. In fact, you'll find the ones that were suppressed when you were a child are the ones that are higher than history inside of you. So in other words, you'll have a stronger desire for chemistry than you will for history once you address that emotion.
Would you be quite sure of that?
I am positive of it.
Okay, because I mean, I was talking about when I was 14. Then when I was,
I know.
Am I hogging this? No,
yeah, you are. But
okay, because I really soon. Yeah,
I understand what you're saying.
Because when I was a child, I don't remember actually being passionate about much except for chess and ping pong. And a bit of
and
reading.
Chemistry.
Oh no, not so much when I was a child. Maybe reading a bit, but I don't know. I just felt like as a child it was more about academic success, whereas my sister was academically brilliant, my twin sister, and I just felt no use even competing with her because I'm just I'll just prove my inferiority. So I felt in that space through much of my.
And if you deal with that fear as well, you'll even discover more of your desires. Every single emotion that suppresses you suppresses your desires. Every fear you have will greatly suppress your desires. So if you have a fear of your father's disapproval, then that will definitely affect your desires. Now, you cannot see your father for 10 years and still have a fear of his disapproval. because it's the fear that was created at the time when it was created, which is 14.
Even as a teenager, yeah.
As a teenager.
Yeah.
So every single fear you have will suppress your desires. Every single fear. And this is important for everyone to understand with desire. If you don't have desires, it's because you have a lot of fears that you're not allowing yourself to feel. When you let yourself feel your fears and work your way through your fears, you'll find desire here, desire there, and then you'll be having a bit of a difficulty to work out which one is the most passionate. But you will find your most passionate desires through that process. But you have to address your fear to do that. Every
so
single
just
time.
let myself feel it in my body, like.
Yeah. But you're intellectually denying even now the cause of your fears, which are childhood related. You want to look at things right now as an adult rather than seeing that your fears were created when you were a certain age. So there was a fear created when you were 14 or 15 about chemistry through your dad interaction with your father. There was a fear created, and that fear lives inside of you until it's released. And that fear will dictate what happens to you until it's released. And this is what many of us do. We go, oh yeah, but that happened when we were 15. Like, I can give you some examples about, the lives of people I know who, like my mother is 66 years old now, right? She has huge fears associated with her father who was abusive because he was drunk all the time and he was violent. Now, she will tell you that she's not afraid of him. But you can see as soon as we begin talking about him, she blanks out the conversation, moves on to another subject, does everything possible to avoid the conversation, which is an indication that she's terrified still of him, and he's dead.
Yeah. So if I actually went to Germany and saw my dad, that would actually trigger probably me a lot, which would be good.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It'd be very good, particularly if you could let yourself feel the fears that you have, because once you feel the fear is no longer suppressing the desire. So what happens emotionally, from an emotional perspective in terms of our desires, is we have desires, right? All of us have them. Many of them are pure. Then what happens, our environment suppresses our desires with its fears, which we then take on and believe as our own. So our environment, meaning our family, our parents, or even kids at school, all sorts of things in our environment, expresses their fear about our desire, and then that causes us to be in fear about our own desire. Fear suppresses...
Or worthiness, right? Because, for example, you're interested in, chess or whatever, this desire, it's useless, for example. The unworthiness of a desire.
So what's the fear?
Oh, fear of...
Judgment.
I wouldn't do anything.
Fear that it's not going to
worthy.
accomplish anything. Yeah. Fear that you're not going to be able to earn any money from it. Fear that it's going to be useless. They're all fears. And all your fears will all suppress the desires.
Fear that I won't have a positive contribution to make with my desire.
Exactly, yeah. Fear that other people won't deem you as a worthy member of society because all
I
you do
won't
is
deem myself
as a worthy member of society.
Yeah.
These are all fears.
Because I should do something worthwhile or something that
and
actually
who
makes
does
a
that sound
difference.
like?
Yeah.
Doesn't that sound like Dad?
Actually sounds like just society in general, actually.
Yeah, well, it does, yeah. and because, they're saying to you, you've got to be a worthy member of society, therefore you've got to do this, you can't do that. And so they're, like I said, they're impressing all of their fears upon your desires, and that has the result of rubbing out your desires, making them look like they're not existent anymore.
Well, for my dad, I think he thought it was better to be an outcast from society, so that there's all these conflicting...
Exactly, yeah. But there is internal fears. It's the fears inside of you that shut down your own desires. Yeah. Always. But these fears were created by events, usually in your childhood. Yep. Can we proceed?
Yes.
Thank you
for giving me that.
No worries.
Sorry.
That's okay. But because everyone understands the relationship between fear and desire. It's very important for you to understand that relationship, because you're not going to discover your desires until you address your fears. And there's many humorous examples myself and Mary could bring up about our own lives where once desire is completely suppressed by fear, it was like desire didn't exist anymore.